I mean, that's more severe than an automobile.
All right. Good morning and welcome to the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors meeting. Today is Monday, June 21st, 2021, and it is 9 a.m. First item on the agenda is to review the agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, seconded by Doug. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Okay, the first item on our agenda is the discussion in regarding the disposal of the Washington Street facility. Eric, did you have that as an item to bring up or to have any follow-up on what we had?
I didn't know until I print off the agenda that I didn't know there was gonna be a discussion or what's.
I sent you an email about it before I went on vacation, about the state.
So,
Okay, so we have to retrain Eric after vacation. All right. Well, really, I think the discussion we had, the last discussion we had is, and Eric had provided us a bunch of information
on
on
the
Washington
flood stage
Street.
and levels and things like
And I
that.
don't think that anybody has a use for that facility. It's all been abandoned by search and rescue. Sheriff's office is no longer using it. It's not a work release facility. So the question is, what do we wanna do with it? I don't know what the process is. Do we have to go through like a declaration of surplus on property?
What we have to do is we have to set forth a proposal and a resolution and then publish notice of public hearing, hold a public hearing about this is what we plan to do with it. And then after the close of that public hearing, you can make a decision to move forward with what your plan is.
Well, I know we had requested already with all of those departments to vacate everything. I believe everything is vacated from our understanding. I know that there was discussion and different potential buyers in the local area that were interested in the location. If we have no use for it, I would be more interested in us disposing of the property, looking at putting it up for sale, and putting those funds back into our general fund. I don't know if anybody else has any other value or any other thoughts around what that could possibly be used for, but I obviously don't feel that we need to have any extra property that we don't need or nor are we utilizing, knowing that that's in a potential flood
And
location.
how did we get that property? We don't have, it's not like a FEMA property we got where we can't get rid of it or anything. It's
No,
free and clear.
Currently.
Yeah.
And years ago, I didn't understand, I mean, it was a part-time jail at one time, I believe so.
So the work release was in the building by the street.
Yeah.
With the addition, the 2010, 2011 additional jail, the Washington Street facility was closed and all of the work release process ran.
Okay.
And that building was converted to general services, like shop, prior to them getting their new building with the search and rescue building. They had their shop down there, stored tools, worked on equipment. That's been the most current use of that first structure. I can't tell you, that structure is not in the best physical shape. There's some issues with the water lines coming to the building, some repairs that are needed.
Yeah.
Water line that was just shut off and not fixed. It's getting fairly dilapidated. That addition is pretty rotten on the front. That structure itself is not the greatest. There is a section of it that has a basement that will get some water in it pretty routinely. The rest of the property, not so much. I don't think we've ever had water across the lot. Flood waters, but I've moved out of that building or prepared to move out of it a number of times over the last few years, but we've never got water inside the garages that are set back. The yard on the backside does get wet, but nothing in the building.
Yeah, I think it's been underutilized and it just has kind of turned into a catch-all piece of property for the county, is what I see. And I think that it just needs to be liquidated.
Are we, then I would guess that the diversion crew or somebody's maintaining it and mowing it and doing all that still too, which diverts us from other properties, so.
Well, I mean, after we built the new maintenance building and we've had, you know, a lot of those equipment already removed from that area, I think it's just costing us dollars to keep upkeep on it.
Yeah, between that and the update of the sheriff's quarters, it was, I think it was, the intent was to get all that to a more local, so we'd quit spreading ourselves out. I think it makes sense to get rid, the question is, do you wanna clean the property up, you know, get rid of that old house or facilities so nobody tries to reuse them? It is in a floodplain, but then that, I think that goes to the city's floodplain ordinance, right? So
Right.
anybody that would have to retask that would have to go through a process.
I would be in favor of just selling it as is. I mean, isn't there a potential way of just being able to say, hey, we're selling it as is?
Yeah,
We're not
we-
taking
we
any
can.
liability back on it? I mean, I
Right.
don't wanna put any more dollars in it at all.
Yeah.
There's still some potential, I can't tell you how much yet, that the contractors throughout the jail project may use it as a temporary laydown for materials if they run out of space. I took Swanson down there and showed them the site, because when they take delivery of the large steel insulated panels that would go on, they'll bring in a couple semi-loads of those. They weren't sure whether they would need it or not, but it was something that they
Oh.
were interested in having it, you know, just for the term of
Yep.
the jail project as a possible temporary equipment and material lay down
But
here.
the jail, I mean, that would be 6 months,
Yeah, at
4
most.
months at most.
Yeah, hopefully.
So I'd say you start the process.
And that's kinda where I'm at on too, because you said we still needed to issue a declaration, is that correct?
Right, and so that we would need to issue a resolution stating what our intended purpose was, hold a public hearing. So that process
Okay.
alone will take us 3 to 4 weeks to get through that process to the point where you can move forward.
Do we need a consensus of what our discussion is then to be able to dispose of that, or because it's
I
not
think
really
I
an
have a
action
pretty good
item?
idea what you're thinking. What I'll do is draft a resolution, and try to get it out to you guys before next week. So if there's anything in there that you're grossly concerned about, you can let me know, and then hopefully on next week's agenda will be a resolution that you're ready to approve, and that resolution will also set the public hearing date.
Okay, then the
Okay.
public can do that. All right, is there any other thoughts around that you guys have?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Sheriff Quinn. The next item is item number 4 with Sheriff Quinn in discussion and regarding the firearms range training facility. Again, this was something that he brought to us, I think, a couple weeks back, in potential discussions.
So we talked about this a few weeks ago, kind of in relation to the Washington Street property and what the plans were for that. Since then, we've had discussions back and forth with the police department about doing a joint facility. That is kind of at a standstill at this point. I believe the city is looking at potentially utilizing the West Liberty Gun Club. I've looked at a couple different properties. I think Jeff had brought up a property on G28 when we met last time. We looked at that. I'm not sure with I guess I'm not familiar enough with the legalities or the ordinances or the state codes that would govern shooting ranges as far as distance from occupied structures and whatnot. The property out there with the Hilltop Edition just to the west, I don't know that that's gonna be real conducive. I did look just through Beacon at, I think, almost every piece of county property. There is a spot out on 260th Street west of Echo. There's actually 2 40-acre plots. One is deeded to the county and also Nature Conservancy. There's a plot just to the south of that's deeded to Muscatine County only. I haven't talked to Kurt Weiss just to see what if that area would be conducive for a ranger training facility. I did talk to one of the neighboring property owners last weekend or weekend before the graduation party. John Sparks owns 40 acres just to the west. Part of his property is in the floodplain, but I think it's on the riverside of his property, and this piece of property is to the east. So I would assume that it's higher ground, if you will. Tony Keys from the police department is here as well. Tony's done a lot of groundwork or a lot of the legwork, as far as research and studies for the city end of it. Again, I think from the talk that we had this morning, they may be at a standstill for the immediate future.
So we are currently looking at our lead mitigation down at Power and Water, where we've had the range since '93, built the upper range in 2010. Not due to state codes, due to contractual issues with Power and Water and the location of the wells around there. They want these lead mitigations done every 2 years, which would be quite costly. And it's not remediation to put the dirt back, it's a removal, and we have to go a long ways with that removal. So for a range to stay there is not feasible. Power and Water's been a great partner for us. So in the midst of this almost 2-year project, it seems, we're trying to lay the foundation for city council's consideration to look at what options we have. Since we've been doing the M-sort for 3 years, we currently take care of service Louisa County, Muscatine, and Cedar County with the SWAT guys and gals. We utilize the range probably more than our own people do. And then to be able to train and absorb some of these costs and share them. Without the ground, and if we looked at a training facility, the proposal I would bring forward is what went out in our RFQ, which is something around a 60 by 60 structure that is built to train in. A couple of ranges, a rifle range, a pistol range, and where there can be some good training done. The training facility would be used for a lot of the defensive tactics, and we can bring training to our area instead of have to send people out. So these are our biggest hurdle right now is location. That's probably, there's no one area that is perfect for us to bring up and say, hey, we're looking at 5 areas. So, and it's gonna be $1 million operation. I mean, to set forth from start to finish, I mean, there's some substantial money that needs to be spent. So we were looking at trying to figure out a way to present this where there's shared costs for agencies involved. And I know in talking with other sheriff's departments as well, there's other agencies that would kick in an amount of money to be able to use the facility, as in Louisa County does not have a facility either, that's their own. And so there's some talking points that we've been trying to lay down to see who's interested. And currently that's where we are right now, trying to figure out who we could use, what ground we could build on, and what I can get prepared for city council's approval.
Have you put together any kind of like annual operating cost ideas on that, Tony? Do you know?
I have not yet.
Sheriff, the location that you said on 260th Street, is there any utilities, any services, anything out there that could potentially house a 60 by 60 building?
No.
And that's on a 40, you said?
Yes. If you go west on 260th, the first hard right, the piece of property, you basically drive off that corner down into it. There's 2 40-acre plots there. Again, the one to the north is Muscatine County, but then the Nature Conservancy is also attached to it. I don't know how that would work.
It's a joint, we could talk to them.
We talked this morning about another piece.
So one of the pieces of the puzzle with even the M-sort was, hey, if you guys join forces and it's easier to spend money than spend it all in one area. So people have stepped up. There's an area that we could get a piece of ground for $1, but we have to get permission from people around us to be able to build a range out there. And so, and there's specific requests that this goes to Muscatine City and Muscatine County. And so there's some options that we have to look at on the table to talk about, but it's very specific that it's for both agencies.
So
Well, I see a terrific advantage for
Yeah.
all law enforcement in the county, within the county, and actually some of our smaller county neighbors that probably can't afford a first-class facility anyway, that they could join and participate, because you wanna have a good training facility, it's very important, so.
The range that we used up until recently, Frank Nelson's property. Frank was, and the entire Nelson family was great to us as far as letting us use their their ground to shoot on. Frank passed a little over a year ago. And so we've kind of been at the mercy of who will take us, and have been shooting at private ranges. I would like to, moving forward, be able to set up something, that is a long-term, that's ours. And this would be close to, law enforcement. It's not gonna be a public access range. It would be for those partner agencies, whether it be the city, the county, Wilton, West Liberty, Wise County. That's something that the Nelson family did, was State Patrol shot there, Wilton PD shot there, West Liberty. I think Iowa City and University Heights came down and shot there. I would foresee that being a thing, if we had a centrally located facility. That was a law enforcement facility. I know that was one of the concerns with the range that county conservation wanted to do or put up a few years ago. One of the concerns was, it was gonna be the Wild West out there. I can assure you that that would not be the case with a law enforcement only or public safety range and facility. So,
Sheriff, how is, and this is just me not knowing all how other things work, how different is your qualifications from the police in the city? Is it similar? Do you guys have to do like, I thought there was like something at the MPW, there was ropes and stuff that you had to run and move and then shoot?
so our uniform personnel, statewide, typically do the same qualifications across the board. It's a 25-yard qual course, start at 25 and move in. With the MSORT, it's our Special Operations Response Team. It's a joint TAC team with the city, county, Louisa County, Cedar County. We do multiple different scenarios, shooting on the move, shooting out of vehicles, not moving vehicles, but really any scenario that you can think of that those guys would be put into. It's done safely, it's done under the control of firearms instructors. Typically when we do that, we have a handful of instructors on site. So it's, again, not a Wild West shootout where people are twirling their guns and firing up in the air, so.
So currently, or in the past, Cedar, Louisa, Muscatine, and even some in Johnson County were utilizing the facility that was here in Muscatine County when the Nelson family had something there.
Correct. The State Patrol has since revamped, I think, their range up at the Stockton, the Post 12 headquarters. They've had a range up there for years and years. It went unutilized. It wasn't up to code or up to spec. When we quit using the Nelson range, they revamped theirs, so they're shooting at their place now. I would foresee if we did have a facility, there's not a lot of places you can get out and shoot 100 yards. We can do it down at Jim Brown's. We could do it out at Nelson's. I don't believe the State Patrol range goes out that far. We had talked about if the property was such that we could get out and do longer distances. We have a sniper team attached to the TAC team that, they'll shoot out to 300, 400, 500 yards. They have a private, it's a farm field up by West Liberty that they can get out to a grand. But it's when crops are out and nobody's in the field, kind of a once a year type deal. We wouldn't be looking at something.
If we could get 300 yards and a couple handgun ranges, one for training, one for qualifications, that's what we would be looking at. What you're specifically talking about, Santos, is the physical agility aspect of the SWAT team, dragging the dummy, doing the pull-ups, getting over the wall. That was built down the power water range.
Yeah, I remember
to
going out and looking at that.
Simulate getting that heart rate going and putting these guys under some type of stress. And so they're fine motor skills to see how that changes. So that also is part of the SWAT team, which is much different than uniform patrol.
Would you envision putting that in this structure then? Is that what the structure would be about?
Absolutely.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at, to make sure that somehow they still all meet all the things and everything that MPW has is no longer.
So you're thinking it's about $1 million to build out this facility capability? We just gotta find some ground and,
Correct.
and could I assume that like Warren's on board and Brad down
So
in,
Cedar County, I have not talked to Warren
Yeah.
about that facility, and right now they shoot at different areas up there as well. Now, we do utilize their guys on the team, they come with us, but we've also gone up to Cedar County to shoot. Chief Deputy Helsher, who is going to be leaving Louisa County, is who I spoke with directly about the joint range, and that's something that I'm sure Brad is familiar with, but nothing's moved forward on it. No price specific yet, but it's very minimal.
I don't know if either of those locales would have property, hard telling, right? I don't.
Helsher didn't have anything for me in Louisiana. We were trying to keep it within 20 minutes of the
Yeah,
PG.
Sure.
So, you mentioned that there was a property though, that if it was done jointly, that you guys could look at it for $1,
There
correct?
is one currently.
Alright, so is that capable of doing everything that you just mentioned right now with the 300 yards?
Yeah, I believe we'll get really close to that. There's some of the hurdles that we have to jump, once the approval's given on both sides and we can figure out the direction to go, is whether or not people in the area, the citizens in the area will be okay with it. And we can do baffles and do berms, and we've been in contact with Eric as well, just trying to figure how do we design this range to minimize the noise and not bother people. But our schedule is much during the week, very few night shootings, and then it's not much on the weekends, so. But with the law enforcement qualifications, we have to do night shoots, and we have to do some inclement weather shooting, so.
Yeah, but I don't, yeah, all that's schedule, you can schedule and work with
Absolutely.
people, and I think you'd get pretty good support.
So I think I'd like to see a detailed more of what those cost breakdowns would be. Maybe some estimates that you guys have already kind of come up with, because obviously, you know, sheet of plywood went from $20 to $60. You know,
We're
is
still
that,
working on
is
all
that, is that something that we could pursue and have some of those discussions? I think the other item is this is definitely a potential to have that discussion with the city, maybe on that upcoming joint meeting. I would believe that the city would be in favor of it, but if we had a breakdown of what those joint costs could be from your guys' discussions, and then share that with us, and then maybe we could have that on our agenda to discuss, and then maybe even possible action in that meeting, if there's a discussion on that.
The conservation officers probably have some type of qualification requirements as well, right?
So the conservation officers are certified peace officers in the state of Iowa, so they would have the same yearly qual. Lieutenant Schmidt runs them through their qual course every year. We're in the midst of doing our certified staff, also the transport, or the correctional officers that are able to do federal transports. So we've been in the midst of doing qualifications for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks now. Typically we'll set them up 2 days a week, break them down into 4-hour blocks, and we get on to Browns and do that. So I would foresee, if and when this moved forward or it came to fruition, that we would get draw from both Wilton and West Liberty, Louisa County, Cedar County.
Yes, I think it'd probably surprise us all if we knew the demographics of the area and how many people are
Could
faced
utilize it
with
from it.
getting this done
Yeah.
every.
I look at Blackhawk County has a training facility, it's the sheriff's office facility, but almost every agency within driving distance up there utilizes that range. So I would foresee that being the same thing here. we'll continue to work.
We'll work numbers, it's really hard due to the area we choose, how much dirt needs to be moved, the fencing. So I've tried to work numbers several times, but, you know, are we getting rid of timber? There's so many factors that come into play there.
Yeah.
So I give you that loose number on how to do it. We've also looked at indoor range facilities and how to make that work, and that's just even more expensive.
So has council or has anybody done, I mean, have we sought any professional help on this? I mean, you've got a job to do, you both do. And maybe necessarily looking at dirt work and building ranges isn't job one. Have we done anything there? Are we contemplating things or?
Yeah, the sheriff's been, up to speed on that as well, the chief had requested, RFQs to try to get somebody that could come in, because it's too much for myself. That does this every day, and what it would take to get the structure we're at, so we're in the process, we're hoping to have another meeting in a couple weeks and discuss the RFQs that came in, and then be able to go to the next step of what are we looking at for a location and how can we make it happen.
And so we don't have a funding plan for the RFQ necessarily, we just have an RFQ out there. And this has been pretty much between the sheriff and the chief have kinda been driving this a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would have a conversation with Kurt Weiss, in regard to the amount of work that they did in the conservation group with that particular gun range. And, the NRA has a lot of good help for range planning, facility planning, tremendous amount of help from what Kurt told me. I followed that pretty close. Looking at a 300-yard range, now as in then, it appears to me that this facility would have to be somewhat like on the edge of a river bottom or whatever in regard to housing and the amount of, I believe the distance was 2 miles. There couldn't be an inhabited dwelling. I believe it was 2 miles downrange. I don't remember the exact angle it had to be and so on and so forth. But when you take all this criteria and put it together, there actually is a very, very, very small amount of acreage that a facility like this can be constructed on. And so it's not like a person can say, oh, we're just gonna put one up at XYZ point. Doesn't work that way according to the research from the conservation group on theirs, and they did a tremendous amount of work on that. And it just didn't fly with the opposition. But
I don't know if there's different stipulations as far as public access
correct.
versus.
That was gonna be my next point. Now, I think with a professional training center, there's probably going to be a different criteria. So, but I certainly would have a conversation with Kurt and talk about what he had learned. And I'm sure he still has a tremendous amount of that information and
A
contact.
marketing person could spin that to be a benefit with frequent visits by law enforcement.
I have a good friend of mine that's on the NRA board, and he's actually out in Virginia this week.
Sure.
So I can pull whatever information from them I need, so.
And I did reach out to the NRA.
You bet.
Right now, they were just, it's COVID.
And I would assume
going
that
on.
you guys had, I would assume that it's more for the public.
And I don't know that property that
recognize-
Kurt looked at, would that be a candidate?
The issue with that is gonna be floodplain and building. That was one of the things that came up
So,
during their talks, as they talked about putting a building up, and I think that got nixed due to the,
It was
FEMA
a
regulations
FEMA
and
acquired property,
Oh, it's a FEMA.
so we're restricted from any permanent structure.
so.
Well, maybe you can buy something from the neighbor.
you know, the first thing I thought about when we talked about this initially was to find a piece, a parcel that somewhat neighbors possibly conservatory ground, because there is no homes, no dwellings down through those properties. And The conservatory owns thousands and thousands of acres in Muscatine County.
And that's, the spot on 260th Street, the property to the west, John and Cindy Sporks owns. And he bought it just strictly for hunting. So it's pretty desolate out there. There is a house on the corner where you would drive in.
Yeah.
But again, it's a 40 acre, 39.7 acre plot.
Oh,
So it's pretty desolate out there.
yeah.
So, we'll continue moving forward. And once we get some, I'm not gonna call them hard numbers, cause.
Yeah,
with
well, no, and
construction
again, I
costs,
think
you
there's
know.
just some general thoughts around what, I think what we would like to, or I would like to see is, you know, who all would be in that demographic, as Jeff had mentioned, that you believe that could possibly take advantage of this. I think that would help us have those discussions. I think it would be value added when you have some of those potentials, and then, you know, looking further, is there even potentials for grants or availability for some sort of dollars from the state? You know, this is a joint effort that normally we don't do a lot of, other than, I think, Muscom and things like that, but I think this is another good, you know, discussion that we can utilize the tax dollars jointly and kind of keep that within even potentials as outside agencies and counties beyond Muscatine that may be able to contribute or take advantage of this facility. That would be a benefit for all
Yeah, I
of the
think
county
if you look at the
residents.
funding plan, you know, basically the taxpayers pay for everything, but,
Yeah.
you know, this seems to me like a countywide issue would be a good plan. And then we solicit other counties to the same for their enforcement people.
I think they would take
You
advantage
could
of
probably
it.
build a funding plan.
I think we could, it's just a matter of who would all be utilizing it, what, you know, and what would it need to look like? And that's something that you guys need to provide for us, because we don't know that other than what you're mentioning to us and what I had saw, the belts and pulleys and where you guys were at out there. You know, I don't know all how that, I thought it was really cool, but I think that's something that you guys need to qualify. And that's why if it's both similar to what you guys are doing, then obviously that's what we want to try to move forward with. I am in favor of that. I think I can't speak for the rest of the board. I'm sure that they are, but I think we need to have some sort of, you know, breakdown of what that would look like, and then,
Right.
and then maybe have that discussion with city council. So if you think we can have something maybe a little more detailed, or already have some new information, I believe that's in August or in September?
It's
When do you think you'll have that
in
RFQ?
September.
In September.
I think that, we'll be able to select who we want to use, and then once, we get with the city admin, and then we present that to the city council. There's some time that's gonna go by yet, so if you're looking at August,
End of September is when the joint meeting
I would
is
say
gonna
we
be.
at least have a direction of which way we wanna go.
So you've got an RFQ issued, the responses are back.
Yep.
So now you're into the selection process, and that RFQ, you'll have to look at their process to determine kind of what kind of a time frame they said that you'd have it.
Yep.
And then have you looked at, in that RFQ, did you talk about scope of services? Did you talk about what you were gonna ask them for?
Yep, I did.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, perfect. Good.
So we'll continue working on that. When we do have more information, I'll get ahold of Nancy and have her throw that on the agenda, and we'll be back, so.
I think hopefully to try to keep the broad mindset of let's look at that, if it's a property that you have that contingency plan as a backup of another location just in case. So if something were to fall through, you already had that. I know that would be more work, but I think that would be more value added, knowing that way if you guys are still gonna have a shooting range of some sort, we probably have two different ways we're looking at it.
And there's been half a dozen properties that have been looked at
Okay,
already.
okay, good. But then you guys are already all over. I was just thinking.
It's been a process.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Thank you.
Quinn,
Yes.
does he spell his last name?
KIES.
Kies?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
You can call it whatever you want.
All right, moving on to the next item, discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of June 14th, 2021's regular meeting.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, seconded by Nathan. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The next item is correspondence. Doug?
Emails, I got one from Nathan about the Iowa Workforce Development. Santos about the Catalyst grant. I got one from Greg Nelson on the water service expansion in Louisa County. I talked to Nancy Miller about an erosion problem, and I met with Corey Kilberg on Douglas Avenue at the Nature Trail Bridge. That's all I had for correspondence.
Scott?
I had contact from Greg Nelson in regard to the water supply to Louisa County, and that's about all I had.
Okay. I had, on the 17th, I met with the new candidates that were interviewing for the West Liberty City Administration and the library. A lot of good candidates that they were interviewing. I met with the mayor earlier last week in regards to the scheduling and discussions on this upcoming Zoom meeting and some of the agenda items that she had discussed that they were looking at, that they were gonna have, and having that discussion just in detail about getting Nancy and Carol together and making sure that they were on schedule in the future, what they had plans with the school board as well too. And I believe that change may have been coming from the school board, I'm not sure.
Yeah, because the week in August that we were looking at is their first week of school starting, so they asked to push it back
Yeah.
to later in September.
I also had a call, or not a call, an email, I'm sorry, from Mr. Nelson in regards to that expansion. I went back and forth, thinking about a half a dozen emails with him. His concerns were the request that Louisa County is looking at potential MPW expansion along the Highway 61 to Louisa County, and I shared with him about how current MPW header runs already in that direction. He was concerned about Fruitland as well too. I shared with him that 3 or 4 blocks behind that gas station on Highway 61 is already run by city sewer as well too. And if those discussions that Fruitland were to look at expansion of water, that would be a decision of Fruitland. That wouldn't be a county decision. I shared with them, and overall, that would be a city council decision unless that header were to pass into county limits, then it would be brought to our board, but currently it was not, and he was happy and appreciative with that feedback that I shared with him. I also got a letter from Nathan in regards to the Iowa workforce. I believe that was a letter from Jackson County asking for discretionary dollars, I believe, of how it was for potential Iowa workforce development and targets that they were asking from Des Moines. That's all I have for correspondence. Nathan?
So I had contact from Sierra Club regarding the MPW conversion to natural gas, and then just the the standard updates we tend to get. I think there was one from public health on COVID and such. And I believe that was it.
Okay. Jeff?
Well, I don't think I had anything new. I had the only one, I had the Sierra Club as well, as Nathan did, and I had Greg Nelson and a couple of the other little ones, but that's all I had. Nothing further to note.
Good. While we're there, any meetings?
I had no committee meetings last week.
Okay. Nathan?
I had the Veterans Commission meeting on June 15th. It was, we are down a member now, and so we've got applications out. I think they're open through this Thursday or Friday. Is that right, Nancy?
Yes.
And people can submit their applications. On the 16th, on Wednesday, we had the special meeting of the Mississippi Valley Workforce Board, and that was primarily, to discuss the this large amount of funds coming from the federal government, and that was the source of the letter written by our chair, Jack Willey, requesting that Director Townsend give allow local control to the extent possible of federal funds coming in for workforce development, and we talked about a few other workforce development ideas that could go along with those funds.
Nathan, I tried to reach out to Jack on that, but I never got an answer back. Is there any value, do you believe, in that? I think that that letter is good for us to be able to have that local control, but do you believe that that there's any value in us writing a letter kind of?
That was discussed,
Yeah.
you know, we definitely, the consensus was to encourage county, subdivisions to press that as well. There was also discussion about contacting local legislators, which we'll be doing as well, so, there may be, you know.
Okay.
It's a whole lot of money, and, when there's a whole lot of money, people get their undies in a bunch sometimes, so, I think it's useful, I don't know if it'll be effective. But,
Well, you know, the challenge I see with it, you know, and Kate and I had a little bit of a discussion, you know, some of the numbers they're throwing around, you know, so this workforce board, the 8-county area is about a $2 to $2.1 million budget. And, you know, they're talking about just the percentage that this workforce board would get if it was some kind of an allocation base would be multiples of that.
Yeah.
And you know, the bottom line is, it's really hard for an organization that's running at a $2 million spend rate to go quadruple that or something. So I think, you know, while it's nice and that there's funding may be available, you have to look at what can you manage and what, because again, you know, the caution I have, and this was back with like same thing in mental health when we saw these federal dollars and COVID relief funds coming in. There's gonna be a tremendous amount of administrative burden on the counties and our staffs to make sure that we comply with all the federal regulations. Or the local taxpayer is gonna have to pony up the reimbursement of those dollars if they don't meet the rules. And the rules have been fairly vague on a lot of this stuff, so we saw that really early on with the mental health region, when we had a couple of $1 million or whatever, you know, and you see where the state's having some issues where they're, you know, debating whether they appropriately spent some or not. So I just, you know, it makes me nervous, it just makes me nervous. I think it'd be great, cause I think the workforce board is doing some innovative things and a good job, but yeah, I just worry when you start throwing a lot of money into things that stuff can go awry quickly.
Well, and that's why I thought there was value in that letter of how that was, you know, being requested and what he was trying to ask for. I just didn't know if there was any value in us kind of just sharing that same input or that thought process.
I think there's a danger to all public agencies at this point. I mean, the federal government over the last year is just printing money and throwing it at people. And as we've seen in many cases, without, as Jeff says, clear definition as to how you can use it. So there's certainly the concern that Jeff raises about, do you use it now and then you get called to repay it later because you didn't quite follow the rules or the rules hadn't gelled yet. But also, you know, one thing we've seen sometimes, and I'm not picking on the mental health region, I think it's just an example, but it's something you see a lot is people using one-time money to fund ongoing costs. And that is a real danger that I foresee here as well. You know, you hire people with this money, and pretty soon you got to keep paying them, and you don't have that money any longer. So that's something I'm going to be working to caution us on the workforce board not to do, to use this money responsibly. Not that I think we'll use it irresponsibly, but the temptation is always there when you're handed just a giant pile of money, which is not a problem most folks ever have to deal with in their lives.
Okay. All right. For meetings, I had a We Lead meeting on the 15th. Again, I shared with you guys the Catalyst grant and the $100,000 that was awarded for West Liberty on buildings for downtown. Positive impact and kind of a good shot in the arm for West Liberty. On the 18th, I had a meeting with the Drainage District number 13. We were able to meet with Jim and myself, went down there to their meeting. They had agreed on basically knowing that they had current, I'm sure you guys are aware, they have one of the 1935, 32 or 35
Yeah.
pump that looks like a small bus. is failing, and there's absolutely no way of continuing to get parts. So they're in a situation that has got them to the point where they know if they were unable to really get into a flood potential, we would have major issues with that pump. So I talked to Jim, and we were able to attend their meeting on the 18th. What they were able to do is reach out to Klinger and Associates, found a used motor, which kind of concerned me initially at first, but knowing the cost of one of these huge motors are, knowing that a brand new one somewhere around $375,000, they were able to find this one for $100,000, and for these type of diesel motors, they run 20-30,000 hours. This one has 81 hours, so very positive in that number from that perspective, and being able to get it at 100 and I think it's 104,000.
You invite grandma who only pumped her way to church on Sunday.
I think it was more cycled, just testing. Most of those diesels have to run so many hours. And the other part is now the rest of the gearing, the rest of the equipment, getting the pump pulled, that would require another $400,000+ to do. What we had shared in the meeting was them looking at potentials for warrants to issue for that area, and a discussion with Louisa County on that as well too. They're having to review that, as they're an entity in themselves. We were just there as attendees to the meeting, sharing what I wanted to share with them, is that we would have that discussion. Once they have that warrants, they have to review that. Jim is the county attorney, not the drainage's attorney, so we asked them to review what that warrant needed to be, and then they could ultimately agree if that was the path moving forward. From the meeting, I really believe that they want to do that path. It sounds like that's what they're wanting to do. Overall, the build and rebuild for this pump could range somewhere between $500,000 to $600,000. Right now, I think they're budgeting $500,000. The drainage district is going to buy the motor by themselves, no county dollars in that sense, and then they would look at the warrants for the next step. I did ask them specifically, if this thing has so many minimum hours, could they reach out to this vendor that's in Chicago that owns this motor? They have a 6-month warranty with 1,000 hours. I asked, most warranties and stuff like that are 12 months. I asked, push back, see if we can get 12 months warranty on it. See if we can get, maybe 2,500 or 3,500 hours on it. In a normal year, these pumps are running, a couple hundred hours per year, depending on how our floods are. Obviously, 19, these things were running nonstop. So that's just a indication of what these need to be. But again, the criticalness around that was pretty needed, knowing that we are not in a flood year, but that doesn't, I don't think anybody in here knows when we do and when we don't. So I think it was a positive meeting. I'm looking forward to getting feedback from Jim and that drainage district of what next steps we would have moving forward. And that's all I had on that. Scott?
Okay. I had on Wednesday the 16th, I had Riverbend Transit, and the ridership is throughout, basically the whole operation is still soft. And as we come out of this COVID situation, and they're actually going to hire a marketer to try to promote what Riverbend does, and the customer base that they supply, which I think is an excellent idea. And so they're moving forward with that. Also on Thursday the 17th, I had Conservation Board. That's all I had.
Wednesday, the 16th, was Wilton Development at noon. And Thursday, the 17th, was Fair Board meeting at 8 o'clock. And those are the only 2 meetings I had this week.
All right, I apologize. I also had a meeting with the DNR earlier last week too, and I don't know the date, so I'll have to look at that once I get back. The discussion was around potential sewer line running over to the deep lakes and the future expansion that the city was looking at doing, and then the discussion that I know that we had also had initially looked at for the cabins that we have out there as well too. When I shared with them the discussion that I know Kurt had mentioned at one time, that they would look at, 50 up to 100 campsites if possible. Their view right away quickly was like, yeah, you definitely need to look at some alternatives beyond just running, a drainage field, and a sewer system of some sort would definitely be a very good viable option when they saw just when you look at it from an overhead Google Earth view. It was just a Zoom meeting that we had, but it was a positive meeting, and they just shared with us some thoughts on moving forward on that. That's all I had as well too. Moving on, number 8, items with the administration office. The first item is discussion and possible action authorizing the chair to execute a contract with Riverbend Transit for specialized transportation service FY 21-22 in the amount of $7,000.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, seconded by Scott. Any discussion?
This was done as a roll call.
I just wanted to mention, this is the amount that they always ask for. I am extremely grateful that they are very good with their dollars. I know, Scott, you've always been a big supporter of this group, and I'm very pleased of how they've continued to do that, and I'm surprised that they never asked for more dollars.
They do a great job.
So I just want to applaud them and their team on that. Next item is discussion and possible act.
Do you vote?
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. So there was a motion by Jeff, seconded by Scott. My apologies on that. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Okay, next item, discussion and possible action to accept the renewal agreement for the HIPAA compliance services with Car Wash Compliance Solutions in the amount of $12,960.
Move to approve.
Motion by Jeff, seconded by Nathan. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Okay, the next item is discussion and possible action authorizing the chair to execute the revised agreement, serve as employer of record for the Mississippi Valley Workforce Area Board Executive Director and Executive Assistants with a 3% administration fee.
This is revised because they added, they're hiring an executive assistant. Again, they're reimbursing us for all of the costs we incur plus 3%.
Yeah, and that's all I saw in the agreement. That was the only change yet.
Yep, and the number was updated to reflect the current executive director is getting a raise July 1st, so it accommodates that raise and what they'll be paying the executive assistant.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Has that been worked okay for you, Nancy?
Yes, yeah, it's really not been an issue for us at all. It's pretty smooth. Filing for, submitting for reimbursement, and they're pretty prompt in their payment to us, so no problems.
All right, motion by Jeff, seconded by Nathan. Good discussion there. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, 5-0. Okay, the next one is action to accept the June 2021 payroll claims.
Move to approve.
Motion by Jeff, seconded by Scott. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Any other items, Nancy?
I don't have anything else.
Okay, number 9, receive information from county employees. Keith, go ahead.
Good morning.
Morning, Keith.
I have a couple things for you. It's just kind of informational. Down on G28, the trail that comes from Hershey Avenue and passes under the
The bypass.
bypass and comes out there and dead ends. When that was, and designed by the DOT and constructed under their contract, and as near as I can ascertain, never any agreement with the county. And I've asked Kurt about that also, but anyway, just the picture there, when you see the end of the trail, initially it was an asphalt connection, and the city actually came along and built a handicap compliant ramp with the warning domes in it quite a number of years ago. Well, in the final field review of our G28 project, the DOT has essentially maintained that we need to go to the other side of the road and build a handicap ramp and a 5x5 turnaround so that we can take people across a 55-mile-an-hour road to find out that there's nothing over there and turn around and go back across the 55-mile-an-hour road. And to which you can imagine I've told them that that was one of the stupidest things I've ever heard of, and does not common sense ever apply.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Option to put a gate there on, by the ramp?
frankly, and not because of me, but my staff is even more incensed than I am about the stupidity of it. They've read all of the ADA, all of the pro-mag stuff, and cannot find anywhere that it says this shall happen. They've asked the DOT to show us in writing where this shall happen, or is it just Jeff's opinion? But my efforts, where I think we will end up, because I literally, as I said, or I got an email responding to this, I think we'll be tearing out the ramp. And I just want you all to be aware of whatever stupidity you see going on down there, we're kind of being driven to have to do.
So, the ramp that basically, this is the ramp that I think we got called on this a couple, it might have been a year or so back.
Could've.
Because of the fact that, one, it was an asphalt, the stuff started lifting a little bit, and it was an area.
Oh, that's on the trail, yes.
Yeah,
This whole trail it's the trail to nowhere.
yeah, so that's what I'm trying to get at, so what
There
you're,
was no agreement on this, and I drive by there all the time, I've never seen anybody on that trail, they're always on the shoulder of the
Yeah,
road.
so what,
the DOT's heard all of that from me.
so
And I
what
drive by there multiple times a day, and I've never seen anyone on that trail.
Well,
Period.
just briefly, so I guess, I mean, they're like, well, boy, you need to document this, so I guess you're gonna be one of my testifiers
Be happy to.
so
if
my.
we document it.
But my question then, Keith, is in the area that you have, basically the small L, if you're gonna call that
Yeah.
the ramp, so how far are we digging that out? What are you
Just-
proposing?
just
Just
the
that
piece
portion that goes
between
to
the-
the street, to the
Yep,
road?
just that piece. Just that piece. I'm
And
trying to deal with this in the lowest
Because
cost
it's an
possible
exit to
manner.
the road, probably, that's probably why they're saying that, because it accesses that road.
Well,
Oh, wow.
person doing this worked for Ames, worked for Ankeny, they're the urban engineer. We're not in the city. There's not a trail or walk on the other side, which there are pretty clear. Well, you don't have to build a sidewalk on the other side, but it's like, I can see a totally different perspective if you're in the city
Yeah.
doing an intersection, and if you're gonna have one here, then you better have one on the
So
other side.
I know when
Even
we-
though if it goes to nowhere, I still would find it stupid. But anyway, I just wanted you to be aware that they could still relent, but
There's gonna be some hot nonsense down there.
it's gonna be difficult. I've been arguing with them for almost 2 weeks now, so.
So what happens if we tell them to sit and spin?
It's a good question. We've had this is not federal dollars, it's a swap project. So I've went above the people putting this requirement out there to appeal to common sense. Of course, they're gonna back up their staff. So, we've been through the whole, in our minds, if it actually was federal aid, can we call this non-participating, which means, okay, we go back and the $200 that it cost it, we only pulled that out so the paving train could get up there. That's why it had to come out. And they reviewed the plans, the DOT. They made us put in plan sheets showing we're doing this. Nowhere did they ever say, build one on the other side. But anyway, could we make it non-participating, which means if it costs $200 and we pay that out of local dollars, and leave it there. I haven't asked, I'm still waiting for more responses, and that might be our last ask. But I just really wanted you to know, and I know you were asking something, so
Oh, no, I don't know, I forgot what I was gonna ask, but I'm in favor for it, that's fine, I think we're good with that.
Okay, in the Better News Department, did meet with the farmer up on F-58, our York Avenue Bridge. Basically, I told him we were to take care of his concerns, and that's all he wanted to hear. I'm not gonna make any promises that this is gonna happen. No, he didn't need that. It's all he needed to hear, so.
Good.
We have our right-of-way acquired on that project, which should not delay it then. Denco Construction has been in crack sealing on New Era. When they get done there, they should be, they're on the Portland pavements now. They should be heading to Zachary. And back to G28, the pavement marking people had came in to touch up some pavement markings, which was on the punch list from last year. So the item I showed you there's the only thing keeping from finaling this thing out.
I think it'd be fine, I think it's good, you pull that out. I do remember when we had some, I think they were looking at an expansion over on the bypass when I was on city. The DOT did require a lot of information, especially if there's already like an exit for a road. They don't like to put a new one on because it's a potential
Right.
accident, it's a near, type thing.
Right.
So it was a lot of paperwork to get that stuff set. And knowing this was a current one, they probably wanna have some sort of continuance of it, but I'm completely in favor. Use the common sense, and I think we'll see what we come back with if they were to push back, because that's just very challenging in my opinion. I think we're putting people more at risk, us putting another one on the other side to nowhere. Now people are gonna say, oh, look at that future sidewalk, and then somebody from the
Right.
city may wanna reach out to us and start doing that. Next thing you know, they're gonna want stoplights out there. So, no, I think
I agree.
use the common sense.
Pedestrian crossing.
Yeah, that's,
Everything else, it's like,
That's-
no, we're not doing that.
so I think, that's a good effort. All right, any other county employees? Don't you guys have anything else to speak? Okay, sorry. All right, hearing nothing from other county employees, do you guys have any, received comments from the public? Hearing none from the public. Any, other items that you guys have for the board? Or for the good of the board? Okay, for now, I think I'm going to ask for a 5-minute,
Perfect. Take a 5-minute recess.
5-minute recess. We will be going into closed session, after 10:10. As of now, the meeting is adjourned.